March 1959. Columbia Recording Studio, New York City. The most important recording session in jazz history was about to begin. Miles Davis had assembled the greatest jazz musicians alive to record what would become Kind of Blue, the best-selling jazz album of all time. In the studio, John Coltrane. On tenor saxophone, Cannonball Adderley. On alto sax, Bill Evans on piano, Paul Chambers on bass, Jimmy Cobb on drums. Legends, every single one of them. But there was one more musician scheduled to be there. A young piano player who'd been working with Miles for months, a talented kid who was supposed to play on several tracks. His name doesn't matter anymore, because what happened that day erased him from jazz history. The session was scheduled to start at 2 p.m. Miles was already there at 1:30. That was unusual. Miles was often late himself, but not for this. This album mattered. By 1:45, everyone was there. Except the young pianist. 2 p.m. Session supposed to start. Empty piano bench. Miles looked at the clock, looked at the door, said nothing. 2:15 p.m. The other musicians were getting nervous. They knew Miles's reputation. They knew how he was about time, about professionalism, about respect. Bill Evans, who was there as the primary pianist, whispered to Coltrane, "Should we start without him?" Coltrane shook his head. "Let Miles decide." 2:30 p.m. The studio door opened. The young pianist walked in. Not running, not apologetic, just walking in. 30 minutes late to the most important session of his life. Everyone in the studio froze. So watching Miles waiting for the explosion. But Miles didn't explode. Miles just looked at him. The silence was worse than yelling. The young pianist started explaining, "Miles, I'm sorry. The subway was..." Miles held up one hand, stopping him mid-sentence. "What time was this session supposed to start?" The pianist. 2 o'clock. "But, what time is it now?" "I know, but the subway." Miles interrupted. "I asked you what time it is." 2:30. "So you're 30 minutes late." "Yes, but..." Miles looked at him for a long moment. Then said 3 words that ended the young man's jazz career. "Pack your things." The pianist blinked. "What?" "You heard me. Pack your things. You're done." "Miles, please. It was just the subway." Miles turned his back, spoke to the engineer. "We're starting now. Bill, you're playing all the piano parts." The young pianist stood there, frozen, not understanding that his career had just ended. "Miles, come on." It was one time. Miles spun around, not yelling, worse than yelling, calm and cold. "One time is all you get." This session was scheduled 3 weeks ago. You knew what time. You knew how important this was. And you decided that 30 minutes of my time, of their time, gesturing to Coltrane, Cannonball, the others, wasn't worth leaving your house earlier. I did leave early. The train. I don't care about the train. I care that you didn't care enough to make sure you'd be here on time, no matter what. The room was dead silent. Every musician there understanding they were watching a lesson. "Miles, please. If you're still here in 60 seconds, I'm making sure you never work in this city again." That was it. The young pianist grabbed his coat, walked out. The door closed behind him. Miles turned to the band. "Let's work." And they recorded Kind of Blue, without him. The album that changed jazz forever. The album that sold millions of copies. The album that made everyone involved into legends. The young pianist's name isn't on it. Most people don't even know he was supposed to be there. That's what being fired by Miles Davis meant. Here's what happened after that day. The story spread through the jazz community within hours. Miles fired him from the Kind of Blue session for being 30 minutes late. In jazz, reputation is everything. And being fired by Miles Davis for unprofessionalism was a black mark that never came off. The young pianist tried to get other gigs. But word had spread. Band leaders would ask, "Aren't you the guy Miles fired?" He'd try to explain. "The subway. Just 30 minutes. One mistake." But they'd heard the real story from the musicians who were there. And the real story wasn't about the subway. It was about showing up late to the most important session in jazz history. About not caring enough to make absolutely sure he'd be on time. About disrespecting, not just Miles, but Coltrane, Cannonball, Bill Evans, every musician in that room. Within a year, he'd left New York, moved back to wherever he came from, taught piano lessons to kids. Never played professionally again. Miles never mentioned him. Never said his name again. It was like he'd never existed. That's the thing about Miles Davis. He didn't need to ruin your career. You ruined it yourself. He just made sure everyone knew. But here's what most people don't understand about that moment. Miles wasn't being cruel. Miles was being honest about what professionalism meant at the highest level. Years later, someone asked Miles about his reputation for firing people. "I'm not running a charity," Miles said. "I'm making music that's going to last forever. You think Beethoven's symphonies are great because Beethoven was nice? No, they're great because Beethoven demanded excellence. When you walk into my studio, into my band, you're not just working for me, you're creating something that people will listen to for 100 years. You think I'm going to let someone who can't even show up on time be part of that?" The interviewer pushed back. "But everyone makes mistakes." "No," Miles interrupted. "Everyone makes choices. He chose to not leave early enough. He chose to risk being late. He chose to assume I'd be okay with it. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. And I chose not to work with someone who makes those choices." This philosophy, this absolute standard, is why Miles Davis changed music history 5 different times. In the 1940s, helped create bebop. In the 1950s, created cool jazz. In 1959, recorded Kind of Blue, the modal jazz masterpiece. In the 1960s, created his second great quintet. In the 1970s, invented jazz fusion with Bitches Brew. 5 different genres, 5 different revolutions, all because Miles refused to accept anything less than complete commitment from everyone around him. People who worked with Miles tell the same stories. John Coltrane: "Miles demanded more from me than I knew I had to give. But he was right. I had it." Herbie Hancock: "I made a mistake during a solo once, played a completely wrong chord. And Miles took that wrong chord and built something beautiful from it. After the show, I apologized. He said, 'I didn't hire you to play right notes. I hired you to play your notes. But I did hire you to show up when you're supposed to, and be present when you're here.'" Ron Carter: "Miles fired me once for being 5 minutes late. 5 minutes. I thought he was crazy, but he taught me that 5 minutes of disrespect is still disrespect. I was never late again. To anything. For the rest of my life." See, that's what the young pianist from the Kind of Blue session never understood. It wasn't about the 30 minutes. It was about what those 30 minutes represented. They represented a musician who thought his time was more valuable than everyone else's. They represented someone who thought almost on time was good enough for greatness. They represented a person who wanted the benefits of working with Miles Davis without accepting the standards Miles Davis required. And Miles had learned something crucial early in his career. Talent isn't rare. Talent is everywhere. What's rare is talent plus discipline plus respect, plus commitment. Miles could find 100 talented pianists in New York, but he only wanted the ones who understood that being in his band meant holding yourself to a higher standard. That young pianist was talented. No question. But talent without professionalism is just wasted potential. After Miles died in 1991, musicians who'd worked with him were interviewed about his legacy. Someone mentioned the story about the Kind of Blue session, about the young pianist who got fired. Herbie Hancock said, "People think that was cruel, but Miles did that kid a favor." "How?" the interviewer asked. "Because Miles taught him the most important lesson anyone can learn. Your talent doesn't entitle you to disrespect other people's time." If he'd learned that lesson, he might have had a career. Instead, he learned it, but too late. Ron Carter added, "Miles firing people wasn't about being mean, it was about maintaining standards. If you let one person show up late, soon everyone's showing up late. If you let one person be unprepared, soon nobody's preparing." Miles understood that excellence is a culture, and culture is built by what you accept. He refused to accept anything less than total commitment. That's why his music is eternal. Here's the truth about the pack your things moment. It wasn't just about firing one musician, it was about sending a message to everyone else in that studio. This matters. What we're doing here matters. It's going to matter 50 years from now, 100 years from now. And if you don't care enough about that to show up on time, you don't belong here. Every musician in that room got the message. John Coltrane was struggling with heroin addiction at the time. He saw what happened to the pianist. He understood Miles would tolerate his struggle, but only if he showed up and gave everything he had. The moment he let it affect his work, he'd be gone too. And eventually Miles did fire Coltrane for his addiction. But when Coltrane got clean and came back, Miles hired him again, because Coltrane had proven he understood the standard. Bill Evans had anxiety, imposter syndrome, struggled with confidence, but he was there on time. He was prepared. He gave everything he had, and he's on the most important jazz album ever made. Jimmy Cobb, the drummer, was the youngest guy in the room. He saw what happened and thought, this is what the top level looks like. Either I meet this standard or I don't belong here. He met the standard. He's on Kind of Blue. The young pianist wasn't, because talent without discipline is nothing. Genius without respect for others is worthless. Potential without commitment is just a waste of everyone's time. Today, Kind of Blue has sold over 5 million copies. It's been played billions of times. It's considered one of the most important albums in any genre, ever. Every musician on that album became a legend, except for the one who didn't show up on time. His name has been forgotten. Some jazz historians don't even know he was supposed to be there. That's what "pack your things" meant when Miles Davis said it. It meant you just chose to be forgotten. The lesson isn't just for musicians. It's for anyone who thinks they can be great while disrespecting other people's time. For anyone who thinks almost on time is good enough. For anyone who thinks their talent entitles them to lower standards than everyone else. Miles Davis didn't become a legend by accepting mediocrity. He became a legend by demanding excellence from everyone, including himself. And when someone showed him they weren't willing to meet that standard, 3 words: pack your things. Not cruel, just honest. Not mean, just clear. Not personal, just professional. Because greatness isn't built by people who show up 30 minutes late and make excuses. It's built by people who understand that showing up on time is the bare minimum. That being prepared is expected, not exceptional. That respecting other people's time is non-negotiable. Miles Davis fired that young pianist 55 years ago. Kind of Blue is still selling, still being played, still changing lives. The pianist's career ended that day. The lesson lives forever. If you want to be great, act like greatness matters. Show up on time. Be prepared. Respect the people you're working with, or pack your things, because someone else will take your place. Someone who understands what you don't. Talent is common. Commitment is rare. And at the highest level, commitment isn't optional. It's the price of entry. Subscribe for more stories about standards, professionalism, and what it really takes to be legendary. Miles Davis said 3 words that ended a career. Pack your things. But he gave the rest of us a lesson that can build one. Respect people's time. Honor your commitments. Understand that being talented isn't enough. You have to care enough to show up when you're supposed to. Prepared. On time. Every time. Or someone else will take your place. Someone who does.